The realm. Do you know what the realm is? It's the 1,000 blades of Aegon's enemies. A story we agreed to tell each other over and over till we forget that it's a lie.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back for another Game of Thrones Season 9 video. As you all know, I have been writing my own version of Game of Thrones Season 9. I have made 4 other episodes so far, but now I will show you what happens in my next one. Shall we begin? This is Game of Thrones Season 9, Episode 5, which I have named The Old Gods. In the very first scene of this episode, the sky is beginning to get dark as the sun slowly slips behind the horizon. Off into the distance, we can see there is a gigantic castle on the far side of the lake. We're in a location we have never been before. We're on the shore of the God's Eye, somewhere we have only seen glimpses of in Bran Stark's flashbacks. This evening is eerily silent. The only thing we can hear is the sound of the red leaves rustling in the wind and the water gently splashing against the rocks. In the middle of this lake is an island, known as the Isle of Faces. As we look out across the lake onto the island, all we can see are the faces on the werewoods. 1,000 blood-red eyes are staring back at us. Eyes that look as if they're full of ancient wisdom and secrets older than the land itself. The faces on these werewoods are different than the ones we have seen in the north. They look frightening, almost like they've witnessed all of the atrocities throughout the history of Westeros. There is something very unsettling about them. It looks as if the werewoods are guarding the sacred Isle of Faces themselves. There must be hundreds of them standing side by side surrounding the entire island in a circle. The werewoods look alive as their red leaves dance in the wind. Suddenly, we start to see some movement. There are shadows shifting back and forth behind the werewoods. We can hear the sound of branches breaking underneath footsteps. Hundreds of small green figures begin to emerge from the woods. They're all wearing helmets that are shaped like antlers. Their green and brown skin looks as if it's made from the leaves. These green men do not look like the innocent children of the forest who were hiding out in the north. These little green men have a ghastly look about their faces. All of them are holding dragonglass weapons in their hands. However, they're not made from the black obsidian we have always seen before. Their dragonglass weapons are green, and some of them are even red. All of them begin to stand shoulder to shoulder on the shore of the sacred Isle of Faces. As the werewoods stand guard over the island, the green men stand there, silently watching over the werewoods behind them. It would be very difficult for anyone to get onto this island unless you are welcomed here. In the following scene, we go back to King's Landing, where a crowd is gathered below the Red Keep. There are now men and women everywhere. The new City Watch is standing around Sir Bronn's lifeless body as they hold everyone back. We see Brienne walking around asking everyone questions in hopes of finding out what they all saw and heard. Her hand is still resting on the hilt of her sword. The City Watch make way for Samwell, who is holding his hand over his mouth while he throws a blanket over Bronn. A few of the Stark guardsmen lift his body off the ground before they lay it down on the back of a wagon. The onlookers are still shocked by the gruesome scene. The shape of Bronn's body can still be seen on the ground, where he was outlined by bits of his own bone and large amounts of blood. Some of Bronn's hair can even be seen on the stone street below the Red Keep. Lord Tyrion is standing there speechless as he watches his friend's body get hauled away. He finally snaps out of his daze as he hears a soft whisper behind him say, "I saw what happened, my lord. I saw it with my own eyes." Now Tyrion looks over his shoulder, wondering where the voice came from. The only one standing there behind him is a short man dressed in rags. He doesn't say anything at first. He looks over at Sam and Brienne. Sam is kneeling down, looking at something on the ground. Brienne is still standing there, only now she's speaking to one of the Stark guardsmen. Not knowing what this man will say, Tyrion doesn't want everyone overhearing him. When he sees that the others are still busy, he looks back over at the man and says, "Follow me." They begin walking away from the scene. They don't walk far before they find a building they can slip behind out of sight. He grabs the man by his wrist before asking him, "What did you see? I want you to tell me every detail." The man looks down at Tyrion, then says, "He was thrown off the balcony, my lord. I was standing right below the Red Keep when I suddenly heard a few voices shouting from above. When I looked up, I saw 3 men standing there. It looked like they were arguing about something. It all happened so fast. The next thing I know, the men began shoving each other, but only one of them went over the railing. While letting go of the man's wrist, Tyrion asks him, "Who are the other men? Do you remember what they look like, or what they were wearing?" "I do, my lord," says the man dressed in rags. "Let me show you." They step back out from behind the building. The man looks over where the crowd is still gathered around. He holds out his finger in front of him, then says, "They look just like him." When Tyrion follows the man's eyes and finger, he can see exactly who he was referring to. They're now looking at one of the Stark guardsmen. Reluctantly, Tyrion says, "I was afraid you would say that." Now he steps in closer to the man. In a low whisper, he says, "Did you happen to see anyone else out there on the balcony? Someone that might have been sitting down?" The man suddenly gets nervous as he realizes the gravity of the situation. "No, my lord, I did not see anyone else." Tyrion now looks away, while silently letting out a sigh of relief. He looks back at the man, then says, "Do not speak to anyone else about this without speaking to me first. Do you understand?" The man nods his head, then says, "Of course, my lord." He then throws the man a small sack of golden dragons and says, "That should be enough to buy your silence for now. What is your name?" The man says, "My name is Damien, my lord." "Thank you for the information," says Tyrion. "I may need you again before all of this is over. Where can I find you?" "That won't be very hard, my lord," says Damien. "I live in Flea Bottom, in the only house that's still standing." The man in rags then bows his head before the men go their separate ways. Now Tyrion begins walking back over to where Brienne is standing. He starts asking her what she has heard. What is everyone saying about what happened? Brienne says, "I find it a little hard to believe, but they're all saying he fell on his own. There had to be someone standing out here that saw something else." "Very well," says Tyrion. "If that's what they saw, then that's what they saw." This makes Brienne glance over at him out of the corner of her eye. It's obvious she doesn't feel the same way. He then looks over at Samwell, who is still kneeling down looking at the ground. He watches as Sam grabs something off the ground before standing back up. Samwell is holding something in his hand as he walks in their direction. When he stops in front of them, he holds it up into the air for them to see. It's a black feather that has blood dripping down from it. "It was laying under Bronn's body," Samwell says nervously. When Tyrion realizes what it is, his mouth hangs open as he looks back up at the Red Keep. His eyes find the balcony that Bronn fell from. It's no longer empty. Bran is now sitting out there alone, staring back at them. The scene ends when Tyrion notices he is staring right at him. In the following scene, we are back in the darkness deep below the ground, somewhere in the north. There are shadows dancing across the cavern walls as the flickering flames illuminate what lies ahead. Jon, Ghost, Tormund, and Howland Reed follow the red and white roots of the weirwood as they make their way further and further south. Ghost is still only a few feet in front of them, leading the way. As the men continue walking, Jon looks back over at Howland Reed, then says, "There are still a few things I need you to help me understand. You said Bran knew that Daenerys would burn King's Landing before we ever went south. You said he knew that I would be sent back out beyond the wall. How did he know? I know Bran can see things, but how does he see them before they happen?" Howland Reed begins running his fingers along the weirwood roots as he walks alongside Jon. He says, "Your brother was given this gift from the oldest gods in Westeros, Jon Snow. The children have gods of the forest, rivers, and stone. The old gods whose names are secret. Their knowledge and wisdom runs deeper than these roots, and where they go, their eyes go as well. They are in harmony with everything around us. When the children gave the weirwoods their faces, it gave them the ability to see what they see. But after thousands of years, they're able to see so much more, Jon Snow. Your brother Bran is one of their greenseers. He began by looking through the eyes of the weirwood, but now he can see so much more as well." Jon suddenly stops walking. He wipes the sweat from his brow as he gathers his thoughts. "If you're right about all of this, then they know we're on our way," Jon says dreadfully. "How can we ever hope to stop them if they're already half a dozen steps ahead of us?" Howland Reed sets his hand on Jon's shoulder then says, "I won't lie to you, Jon Snow. It won't be easy. Nothing ever is. Bran is still in King's Landing right now, surrounded by your friends. As long as we can reach him before he leaves, we still stand a fighting chance. Bran has seen glimpses of the future in his vision since he was a boy, but he hasn't seen everything. He hasn't seen you. When the Night King attacked the cave, he forced your brother to go south while he was still learning how to use his new gift. The children of the south are now fighting the children of the north over your brother's mind. They're like a virus entering his body, infecting everything he sees. The further your brother goes south, and the longer he's there, the more and more he loses of himself. It won't be long before he can no longer control his own thoughts or actions. Hold on, says Jon. You said Bran hasn't seen me. What did you mean by that? Helen Reed smiles and says, the old gods have your brother now, but they no longer have you. Not like they once did. You were resurrected by the Lord of Light, Jon Snow, the same as Daenerys Targaryen. When Bran sees either of you in his visions now, he's looking at things that have already happened. That's why he's still in King's Landing. The scene ends after Helen Reed says, he doesn't know you or Daenerys are on your way. Let's hope that doesn't change. That's our only advantage right now. In the next scene, we go back across the narrow sea. In the city of Atlantis, the sun is sweltering on this afternoon as it sits high in the sky above about a dozen ships that are anchored along the shore. The black and red sails of House Targaryen are dancing in the sky as the wind slams against them, throwing them in the other direction. It almost looks as if the three-headed dragons have taken flight. We watch as Grey Worm and a handful of other Unsullied men walk across the deck as they make their way into the city. Grey Worm has a slight smile on his face. He only focuses on the enormous Red Temple of R'hllor as he walks further and further down the street. It's sitting high up on its hill, looming over everyone below. Sitting above everything else is Drogon. He stretches his wings far and wide as he soaks up the rising sun. Everyone is waiting for Daenerys Targaryen to emerge from the Red Temple. The 1,000 slave soldiers of the Fiery Hand are standing guard outside its massive walls, eagerly awaiting their new orders. The crowd below them has been growing thicker by the day. Grey Worm and his men remove their helmets when they reach the city square. They can see the main entrance and its great wooden doors that are engraved with R'hllor's burning heart. One of the slave soldiers of the Fiery Hand stops them from getting any closer. They wait and watch with everyone else. Suddenly, the large wooden doors swing open. A man in a red silk robe emerges from within. The crowd erupts when they begin shouting his name, Banero! 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 The Unsullied men look around, unsure of what's happening. As Banero raises his arms in the sky, everyone grows silent. In a thunderous voice, he says, Daenerys Stormborn is the fulfillment of an ancient prophecy. From smoke and salt, she was born to make the world anew. She is Azor Ahai returned, and her triumph over the Great Other will bring a summer that will never end. And death itself will bend its knee, and all those who die fighting in her cause shall be reborn, as Daenerys was reborn before your very own eyes. Darkness has fallen heavy over the realm, but that darkness will flee before her. On this day, we will set sail for Westeros, and we shall not return until the Great Other is consumed by R'hllor's great flames. There are 6 more red robes that emerge from within the Red Temple. As Daenerys removes her hood, Grey Worm's eyes begin filling with water. He lets out a long sigh of relief. Daenerys begins walking down the long stone steps, followed by all of R'hllor's highest-ranking members. When they reach the street, the Fiery Hand falls in around them as they escort Daenerys, Kinvara, Banero, and the others to their waiting ships. Drogon lets out another loud shriek before leaping high into the sky. Grey Worm and his Unsullied men can only watch as Daenerys is marched right by them. As Dany nears the shore of Atlantis, she suddenly stops in her tracks when she sees the black and red sails of House Targaryen among the other ships. There's at least 100 more ships docked, each of them displaying the burning heart of R'hllor on their sails and banners. Daenerys begins looking through the crowd, wondering who brought them here. When she spins around, her and Grey Worm lock eyes. Now hers begin filling with water. They embrace each other for a few moments before Dany says, I wasn't sure if I would ever see you again. How did you know I was here? I found out from a man on the island of Noth, says Grey Worm. Oh, I see, says Daenerys, with grief in her voice. She holds his hand, then says, I wish I could have been there with you when you said goodbye. I should have been at your side when Jon Snow betrayed you, says Grey Worm. If you will allow me, I would like to be at your side again. I will follow you until my last day, your grace. I have nowhere else to go. With a smile on her face, Daenerys says, Then we shall sail together. I still have unfinished business in Westeros. The scene ends as Daenerys and Grey Worm walk across the sand over to their ships. In the following scene, we are on a different ship as it reaches a southern shore in Westeros. Arya Stark walks across the deck as the men get ready to drop its anchor. They have made it to their destination. Arya watches as the waves crash against the rocks below an enormous castle she has only heard about in stories. The wall is said to be 40 feet thick at its narrowest, and near 80 on the seaward face. Within that mighty bulwark, the kitchens and stables and yards sheltered safe from the wind and wave. Of towers, there was but one, a massive drum tower, windowless where it faced the sea, so large that it was granary and barracks and feast hall and lord's dwelling all in one. It is crowned by massive battlements that made it look from afar like a spiked fist atop an upthrust arm. As Arya looks at all of her surroundings, the ship's captain walks over and stands beside her. "Welcome to Storm's End, my lady," says the captain. "It is said that this castle was built by the same man who constructed your family's ancestral home. Did you know that, my lady?" "Yes," says Arya. "It was Brandon the Builder, with the help of the Children of the Forest." Right as Arya says this, they hear a loud shriek from above. Arya has to shield her eyes from the bright morning sun as she looks up into the sky. Circling right above them is the same raven that has been following them for several weeks. When Arya looks back down, she says, "Don't wait for me. I thank you for bringing me this far, but I will not be boarding the ship again. I will go to King's Landing by horse from here." "I am sorry I can't be of further service, my lady, but as you wish," says the captain. He then bows his head before he walks away. This is when Arya notices several men on horseback riding her way. One of these men is holding a banner that shows the stag of House Baratheon. Arya smiles, then makes her way off the ship. As she walks across the sand, only one of the riders approaches her, while the others wait on the other side of the beach. "I saw your sails early this morning. I was wondering why there was a Stark ship this far south. I was not expecting it to be you, my lady." "I thought you were heading west," says Gendry, with a big smile on his face. "I was," says Arya. "I changed my mind." "Well, I hope you changed your mind about accepting my offer," says Gendry. Arya cracks a thin smile, but she says no, it's not that. Something else came up, and I may need your help. Gendry stops smiling when he says, "This sounds serious. What the hell happened?" "It's my brother Bran." "I think something is wrong with him," says Arya. Gendry hops down off the horse before asking her, "Did something happen to Bran? Is he okay?" "Well, I'm not exactly sure," says Arya. "It doesn't make any sense, but I think Bran wants me dead." There is several more moments of silence before Gendry says, "This is very serious. What makes you think he wants you dead?" "The man who tried to kill me said he did," says Arya. "Maybe the man was lying," says Gendry. "Maybe he did lie," says Arya. "But what if he wasn't? Not to mention, that's not the only thing that happened. A raven has been following me." After several more seconds of silence, Gendry says, "A raven? What does that mean?" "Well, if you ride with me to King's Landing, you will see," says Arya. "Okay," says Gendry, "I will go, but what do you want me to do once we get there?" "I don't know," says Arya. "I don't know what to do about this." "That seems obvious," says Gendry. "The fact that you're even here, asking me for help, says that you don't know what to do about this situation." "I know one thing," says Arya. "I need to speak with Bran myself. I need to look him in his eyes and ask him why. If there is something wrong with your brother, and he does want you dead, then he might not let you enter King's Landing so easily," says Gendry. "The city will be guarded." The scene ends as Gendry says, "Should I bring some of my men with us, my lady?" In the next scene, we go back below the ground, somewhere in the north. We're following Jon, Ghost, Tormund, and Howland Reed as they make their way through the darkness further and further south. The red eyes of Ghost are glowing in their flickering flames. The albino direwolf leads them through the dark abyss, with the men following closely behind. As they're walking, Tormund Giantsbane looks to Howland Reed and says, "When will this end? It feels like we have been walking down here for days." "Well, that depends on where you want to go," says Howland Reed. "You can access almost any location in Westeros using this cave system. The Children of the Forest dug these out thousands of years ago, even before the first men arrived in their lands. All we need to do is keep following the weirwood south. We will get there much faster than any man would by horse." "When we do get there," says Jon, "what will we do? We don't have an army. It doesn't sound like the Children of the Forest want to negotiate." They already made the Night King. It frightens me to think of what else they might be able to do. How will we stop them? How will we save my brother Bran? Helen Reed doesn't say anything at first. He just keeps walking with his head down as he slings the item he has been carrying on his back over his other shoulder. Finally, after what felt like several minutes, Helen Reed looks over at Jon, then says, "We will have to make our sacrifices, Jon Snow. As I have said before, it won't be easy. Stopping these children of the forest will come with a heavy cost. We won't be able to end this without Daenerys Targaryen and her dragon." This makes Jon think about when he last saw Daenerys, when he stabbed her while they were standing in front of the Iron Throne. He thinks about what that choice cost him. He looks over at Tormund Giantsbane. He thinks about what it cost him when he let the wildlings through the wall at Castle Black. He then looks over at Helen Reed, who is adjusting the large item on his shoulder again, and says, "What sacrifices have you made, my lord?" Again, there is several moments of silence before Helen Reed says anything. Helen Reed looks into Jon's eyes, then says, "There were many, Jon Snow. Unfortunately, I made a great sacrifice that has cost me dearly." With grief in his voice, Helen Reed says, "I had to sacrifice my very own." But before he can finish his sentence, some noises are heard in the distance. The hair on the back of Ghost starts to stand up as his glowing red eyes cut through the darkness ahead. Jon grabs Longclaw, unsure of what they're about to face. They can see there is some light bouncing off the walls about 100 feet in front of them. There are a few shadowy figures moving behind their light. Jon looks at them with a hint of fear in his eyes. They're not able to make out anyone's faces. That's when he shouts, "Make yourself known before you take another step. Who are you? Why are you down here?" Suddenly they hear a voice shout back at them. "We are here on behalf of our queen, Sansa Stark. Who goes there?" This scene ends as Jon says, "I am her brother, Jon Snow." In the following scene, we go back down to King's Landing. A full moon sits high above the Red Keep. We watch as the Hand of the King, Tyrion Lannister, reluctantly walks across the Great Hall. There are hundreds of ravens all over the old throne room. Since there is still a very large hole in the side of the Red Keep, the ravens are able to fly in and out of the Great Hall with ease. They all begin shrieking at Tyrion, who feels an enormous sense of dread as he makes his way to King Bran's chambers. He knows this will not be an easy conversation, but he has to ask Bran himself. What happened? Why did Bronn die so suddenly? There are 3 Stark guardsmen standing outside of Bran's door. A few of them are the same Stark men who were drinking with Bronn at the inn. One of them says, "We have been expecting you, Lord Tyrion." "Why would you be expecting me?" asks Tyrion. As the Stark guardsman opens the door, he says, "You will see. Go ahead and step inside." As he walks into Bran's chambers, the Stark guardsman follows behind him. When they're all inside, they shut the door. Lord Tyrion watches nervously as one of them locks it. When he looks across the room, he sees Bran sitting there in his chair, silently gazing into the fire. He sees there is even more Stark guardsmen inside the room with them. One of the Stark guardsmen throws something from across the room. It lands in front of Tyrion's feet, spilling out onto the floor. When he looks down, he sees there is a small sack with golden dragons all around it. When he looks back up, Bran is staring into his eyes with a very unsettling look about his face. It makes Tyrion feel uneasy as he tries to figure out what's happening. That's when the Stark guardsmen near Bran step aside, revealing there has been someone standing behind them. Lord Tyrion immediately recognizes the man who is dressed in rags. It's Daemon, the man who said he witnessed Bronn's death. His hands are bound at the wrist. His face has been bloodied and bruised. Even the front of his pants are soaking wet. Finally, Tyrion asks Bran, "What is the meaning of this?" With a smile on his face, Bran says, "Where were you, Lord Tyrion? Where was you at when Bronn fell?" "I was in my chambers." "Sir Brienne was there with me," says Tyrion. "Why are you asking me this?" Daemon flinches as one of the Stark guardsmen throws his arm around his shoulder. This Stark guardsman says, "That's not what our new friend has been telling us." "Really?" says Tyrion. As he looks at all of Daemon's injuries, he says, "He doesn't look like a new friend. He looks like a dog that has had all the fight whipped right out of him." He then looks back at Bran and says, "What did you force him to say about me?" "The man said you gave him those golden dragons to have Sir Bronn murdered," says Bran. "This is nonsense," yells Tyrion. "Why would I want my own friend dead?" "I gave him that so I could buy his silence, your grace." "We know you did," says one of the Stark guardsmen. "You needed his silence so he would keep your secret safe. We know that now." "No," yells Tyrion. "That's not how it happened." While looking at Bran, he says, "I wanted him to keep your secret safe, your grace. I did not want all of King's Landing thinking the new king was involved in murdering one of his own council members before I could find out what really happened. This entire country has been through enough. The Mad King, the drunken King Robert, the sadistic Joffrey, my sister Cersei, and that was before Daenerys burnt King's Landing down to the ground. I thought we were finally done with all of this. I did not want everyone thinking we were back to our old ways of backstabbing and murdering each other. I guess I was wrong. Again. What has happened to you, Bran? I thought you would be great for the realm." King Bran has a haunting look in his eyes. It's as if all of his life has left them. The scene ends after Bran says, "What happened to Bran?" "He died in a cave years ago." He looks at one of the Stark guardsmen, then says, "Have Lord Tyrion thrown into the Black Cells. He will be executed for the murder of Sir Bronn of Highgarden." In the final scene of this episode, we go back to the Isle of Faces. All of the red leaves on the weirwoods are illuminated from the full moon that hangs high in the sky above the God's Eye. The green men are still silently standing their watch over the sacred island. We won't be focusing on them in this final scene, however. Now we move inward, into the center of the island, where the woods are much denser than they are on the shore of the lake. The shrieking sound of ravens can be heard from the branches above. In the very center of the Isle of Faces, there is a massive weirwood, standing over 300 feet tall and nearly 30 foot wide at its base. The face on the front of it has a mouth that's so big, a grown man could easily stand inside of it. Its eyes are frightening as it gazes into the fire before it. Surrounding the massive weirwood is a grove of 7 more weirwoods, all facing inward at the fire. This is where the children of the forest would hold their sacred ceremonies, and even their sacrifices to their gods, which they believe are the weirwoods themselves. As the flames in the fire crack and hiss, very large shadows begin to move all around us. Suddenly, there are glowing blue eyes emerging from the shadows around the weirwood grove. The little green men are not the only ones here. This is when we see there are dozens and dozens of White Walkers riding on the backs of giant elks, whose eyes also have a blue glow to them. There is something slightly different about these White Walkers. They don't look exactly like all of the other ones we have seen before. They're gaunt and hard as old bones. Even their armor seems to change color as they move around on their massive elks. One second, they look white as new fallen snow. The next second, they were black as a shadow. White shadows in the darkness. They have a sort of elegance to them, only in a very frightening kind of way. These White Walkers are the children's chosen ones, who were selected to guard their sacred Isle of Faces. No one knows what they're capable of, but they will find out soon enough.